It's not that long ago that an electric car was seen as a niche option, a choice for early adopters. But how quickly things have changed. And that is nicely represented by the fact that Jaguar's first all-electric car, the I-Pace, was crowned the 2019 World Car of the Year.
But what's probably even more remarkable is that a second car out of the 3 finalists for that very award was also all-electric, the Audi e-tron.
It was a bold move by Jaguar to take the lead in the luxury mainstream EV market, and it's not often you see the big German car makers having to play catch-up. But that's been the case this time around, and the approach Audi have taken is rather different.
So different in what way? Well, different because it's actually not different at all. It's just a normal Audi SUV. In fact, you would never know that it was electric. So is that a good or a bad thing? Well, before I tell you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you click on that little bell icon, you will get a notification when our latest video has landed. And of course, you can follow us on all the usual social channels.
So let's get back to the normal bit. And when I say the e-tron isn't different, that doesn't mean it isn't striking, because it's a good-looking car that fits well into Audi's rather vast SUV range, somewhere between the Q5 and the Q7. And it has all the Audi features we love, like the fabulous lights both front and back. But it has very little to set it apart as an EV.
So let's get back to that. Is it a good or a bad thing? And I guess the answer is that it depends on what you're looking for. You know, for some people, I just don't think it's going to be interesting or different enough. But if you're in the market for a luxury SUV and you like the idea of dipping your toe in the EV waters, then I think the normality of the e-tron will probably be quite appealing. You know, it's not going to terrify your granny when you turn up to collect her in it. But neither is it going to elicit the joy that the Tesla Model X and its magnificent doors does in so many people. You know, the only way that you would know this is an EV from looking at it is the charging point. One here and one over on the other side. But my, what a charging point it is. Just take a look at this. Press the button and it gracefully drops down and it just works really well. And when you're finished, same button and up it sweeps. It really is German engineering and design at its very finest.
As you might guess from those generous dimensions, the e-tron is pretty spacious, with plenty of room for 5 adults and their luggage. 7 seats aren't an option, which does give the Tesla Model X an advantage, but you won't have any reason to complain about space for the driver, passengers or their luggage. Head and leg room in the back are excellent, which means that even taller adults won't feel cramped.
As for here in the front, well, it's exactly as you'd expect. It's just a luxury Audi, isn't it? Build quality is great, lovely materials. Here in front of me, you've got the Audi virtual cockpit display. Everything else is controlled on the 2 screens that are here, just as you would expect to see. You've also got controls on the steering wheel. The voice commands work really well, as does the touch screen just down here. The whole thing just feels very, there's that word again, it's coming, normal. It's very normal in here. In fact, really the only slight differences are this open centre console and this thing that I really like. It's like a little handrest for when you flick the gears up and down, and it's really nice when you're on the move, when you're driving for longer journeys. And apart from that, if you look very closely here in front of me, you have a little electric plug, which shows you've got 120 miles left of range before I need to charge. And of course, all your consumption is there in front of you, as you would always find, only again, this time it's measured in miles per kilowatt hour instead of miles per gallon. It's reassuringly normal in here though.
Looking around the interior, you can see it's spacious, comfortable and practical with plenty of good storage. At launch, just 3 versions of the e-tron are on offer. A standard model, a launch edition and an ultra exclusive edition 1, with just 30 of those making their way to the UK.
So the launch edition costs an extra £10,000, but you do get absolutely stacks of extra kit for that. Things like a 360-degree camera, you get matrix LED headlights, rather fancy 21-inch alloy wheels, plus the much talked about virtual mirrors. Now they replace these traditional mirrors, because it doesn't have them on this model, with a pair of high-res cameras that beam a digital feed straight to a screen just inside the car. Now, our advice on those is to probably save the money, because whilst they are undoubtedly a brilliant piece of tech and they'll be a real novelty at first, they do seem a bit strange to use. But overall, there are just no criticisms in here. Well, apart from maybe one or two. Build quality is normally fantastic on an Audi, isn't it? You know, the finish is great, materials are lovely, which I've already said, but if you look a little bit closer, down here, that's a bit rubbish, isn't it? It just feels a bit cheap and a bit flimsy. And the other thing is that the front compartment is opened by a really awkward little handle down there that also feels a bit flimsy. I'm sorry, but on a car of this price, I expect that compartment to be electronically operated. I don't want to be fiddling down there with a bit of plastic every time I have to get to the charging cables.
But we have no complaints round at the boot, which is larger than that of the I-Pace and the new Mercedes. It has a scuff plate to protect it, but there's also quite a bulky section to lift heavier items over. Although storing large loads will be easy, as the rear seats can be dropped flat, making it more practical than its rivals.
One thing I do think is absolutely brilliant though is under here, it is a removable plastic compartment, which is fantastic for my muddy wellies. Isn't that a smart idea? One thing though I don't think so smart is the home for the charging cables. Follow me. Because as I've said, they're kept in this compartment here at the front, which you have to operate with that fiddly handle inside, and then there's another latch in there. And then under here, finally, you get to the myriad of charging cables that we currently need with all the different charging systems that you'll find. I don't think anybody has really cracked a good place to store the charging cables, because they're not going to stay in there, are they? They're just going to end up chucked in your boot where it's easy to get them. I don't know, are you an EV driver? Is that your experience? Do you think your car has the perfect solution to storing charging cables? Do let us know in the comments below. So what's powering the e-tron then? Well, it's a larger battery than you'll find in both the Mercedes EQC and also the Jaguar I-Pace. It's a 90 kilowatt hour battery, and there has been some debate that a battery of that size should be capable of giving a longer range than the official figure, which is 241 miles. I'm not sure I agree, okay, and the reason for that is that I think what is more important is actually not necessarily the range, of course that does matter, but it's how close to that range you can actually get when you are driving this car in real world conditions every day, not in some kind of laboratory testing. And for me, maybe I have a very gentle right foot, I don't know, but I have absolutely no complaints about the e-tron. I've been averaging 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which if you do the maths on that, so it's kind of roughly multiply that figure by the 95 kilowatts that you'll find in the battery, you get a range of around 237-ish miles, I think. It's extremely close to that quoted range of up to 241, the official figure. And okay, it's summer, the weather is lovely, not necessarily relying on the air conditioning, but I have been driving it for nearly 400 miles on motorways, on A roads, around town, just normal everyday driving. And I'm really impressed with it. And I think, as I've said, the reliable range is key for me because it allows you to plan your journeys in confidence. So absolutely, top marks to Audi for that one. As for the rest of the driving experience, well, it's all very normal. There's that word again. It's definitely not as enjoyable as the Jaguar I-Pace is to drive, but it's really not bad at all. It's pretty impressive. It's got twin motors, all-wheel drive. The power distribution feels even and balanced. It's really nicely planted into corners, but it does feel a bit heavy. But then it's a heavy car. You know, it's 2.5 tons. And that's because the weighty bits underneath this haven't been developed with an EV in mind. They've been adapted from the Q7, and that's always a disadvantage with an electric car. The I-Pace definitely has a lightness to it, an engaging drive that this doesn't have. But the e-tron is a family SUV, and it just drives like one. One thing I'm very impressed with though is how refined and quiet and comfortable this car is. I know it sounds a bit daft to call an EV quiet, because that's what they are, right?
But when you're on the move, you can be far more aware of wind and road noise than you'd think, not to mention the occasional whine from the electrics, and it can be quite annoying. But the e-tron is extremely well insulated and really quiet. From the back seat, it's not quite as quiet, which is a little bit annoying for what is, after all, a family car.
Now let's turn to speed, and don't get too excited, because it may have over 400 horsepower, but it's no Tesla in ludicrous mode. And that's probably just as well, because as fun as all that instantaneous power feels when you're behind the wheel, it's not very nice for those little battery cells, which are sensitive souls and don't like being overheated. But you will find that it's powerful enough with a top speed limited to 124 miles per hour. And what you also get is plenty of control over the throttle. The motors cope very well with hill starts, which can be tricky for EVs to handle without slightly rolling back. Now, when it comes to charging, the e-tron has the potential to do it very quickly, as it's capable of charging speeds of up to 150 kilowatts, faster than the Mercedes EQC's maximum charging capacity of 110 kilowatts. Now, if you can charge at that rate, the battery will take just under half an hour to get to 80% capacity. The problem though is that 150 kilowatt chargers are currently few and far between here in the UK. So you're going to have to rely on 80 kilowatt units while you're out and about. That means that a top-up time will take more like 90 minutes, while charging at home on a standard 7 kilowatt wall charger is going to take around 13 hours. But this is still the fastest charging of the luxury SUVs out there. Pretty impressive. And as tempting as it's been to stick it into dynamic mode, it's been kept very firmly in efficient. I've been very restrained, and it's been paying off. Another thing that helps, of course, is regeneration, putting the natural energy that the car creates back into the battery. And if you're familiar with this kind of technology, you'll know that the brakes can feel quite grabby when they're operating, which feels a little bit odd. However, the e-tron doesn't really do this at all. And it's just another example of how far Audi has gone to make sure that everything about this car feels as normal as possible.
As for battery life, well, there's no guarantee of battery performance as there is with the Mercedes, which promises to replace the batteries in its electric SUV if they drop below 70% of the as-new performance within 8 years.
I can sum the Audi e-tron up in just 2 words. Nope, not electric car, luxury SUV, because that's exactly what it is. It's just a normal, luxurious, comfortable family car that happens to be powered by electricity.
If you're in the market for a premium SUV, then make sure you watch my videos of the Tesla Model X and also the award-winning Jaguar I-Pace. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and of course you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter.